On Monday this week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that he would be stepping down as Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party following a leadership election to be held in the next couple of months. He also announced that he had made a request to Governor-General Mary Simon to end the current parliamentary session and prorogue Parliament until March 24th. That request was granted. This means the Parliament won't be returning until late March with a new leader in charge of the Liberal Party. If you're not familiar with prorogation, it's what happens when a parliamentary session ends but Parliament is not dissolved, so there's no election called. The reason it exists is basically to shut down Parliament for a period of time after the government's legislative agenda, laid out in the throne speech that opens the session, has been completed. This goes back to the days when Parliament had a smaller overall role in Canadian life, and completing the legislative agenda only took about half the year. They'd complete their goals for the session, then travel back to their home ridings to work there for the remainder of the year, and come back to Ottawa in the spring for the next session. However, in modern times, as legislative agendas became larger and more complex, parliamentary sessions started becoming longer and longer. Combined with communications technology and air travel, the act of proroguing Parliament became more or less obsolete since there was no need to break up Parliament into multiple sessions between elections. But since the early 2000s, prorogation has been revived as a way to temporarily harp Parliament for political purposes. Chrétien, Harper, and Trudeau have all used it as a way to stop investigations that were underway by parliamentary committees or to avoid confidence votes. This is obviously not what it's supposed to be used for, and the general consensus in government is that it's a terrible abuse of prime ministerial powers and an affront to the core principles of democracy when the other guys do it. Still, with the request being granted by the Governor-General, there's not really much anyone can do other than wait things out until Parliament returns in March. So the question is, what do we do in the meantime? Well, we do what all hard-working, common-sense Canadians do in this situation. We roll up our sleeves, and we make ourselves some prorogies. The first thing you need to make for your pierogies is the dough. I'm doing a double batch because I'm making two types of filling, fresh cheese with dill and cabbage with bacon. In a large bowl, I'm adding 1 kilogram of flour and mixing it with 10 grams of salt. Then crack 4 eggs into a container and add enough water to bring the total wet ingredient weight to 65 to 70% of the flour weight, so 650 to 700 grams total. Mix the water and eggs together, then start adding it to the dry ingredients, pouring slowly to allow the dough to hydrate evenly. The dough should form a ragged ball, which you can knead for a few minutes before putting it back in the bowl and covering it to rest for half an hour or so. While the dough rests, let's work on the fresh cheese. Add 2 liters of whole milk to a saucepot, then heat on medium-high until the milk is almost, but not quite boiling. If you're using a thermometer, you want it to be in the range of 190 degrees Fahrenheit or 88 Celsius. Slowly add a quarter cup of white vinegar, then remove the milk from the heat and let it stand for 15 minutes. While the milk is resting, let's get started on the cabbage filling. Add 5 or 6 slices of diced bacon to a large skillet and put it over medium heat to allow some of the bacon fat to render out. Once there's some fat in the pan, add a minced onion and cook until the onion is soft and slightly caramelized. Now add in an entire head of red cabbage chopped into small pieces. Once the volume is reduced enough to fit a lid on, season with salt and pepper, add a bit of hot water, then cover, turn the heat down to low, and let it simmer until the cabbage is very soft, about 1 hour. Now that the milk is done resting, gently stir in a handful of chopped fresh dill. Then pour the liquid through a cloth-lined strainer, using a bowl to catch the whey if you want to save it for other uses. Stir in a bit of salt, then squeeze the cheese ball to remove excess liquid, and allow it to drain for another few minutes. Once it's ready, put the cloth ball in a container, and let it cool in the fridge. Now let's go back and knead our dough for a second time. You should notice that the dough has become softer and will form a much smoother ball than the first time. Since I'm making 2 fillings, I'll take half the dough and press it out into a thick rectangle. Then cover and let it rest for a bit before rolling it out. Once the cabbage is cooked, use a masher to turn it into more of a chunky paste mixture for stuffing into the pierogies. Add a tablespoon or 2 of flour to help it thicken, and cook briefly to eliminate the raw flour taste. Take the mixture off the heat and let it cool down before use. To finish off the cheese filling, take 2 egg yolks and blend them together with a tablespoon of butter, and add a bit of salt and pepper to taste. Then add the fresh cheese, and mash the whole mixture into a paste. Now it's time to roll out the dough. Using a large rolling pin, roll it out into a thin flat sheet. Then use a circular cutter or the rim of a glass to start cutting out circles. Remove the excess dough and save it to make more wrappers later. Once the circles are cut out, add a spoonful of filling, then start to wrap them. The key here is to use the stretch of the dough to get around the filling without trapping air inside. Pinch firmly to seal the edge, and you're done. Repeat the rolling, cutting, and wrapping process until you run out of dough or filling. Once all the wrapping is done, we're ready to cook. Add the pierogies to a pot of boiling water, stirring briefly to keep them from sticking together. After a few minutes, they should float to the top of the water. At this point, they're ready to eat, but I like to go the extra mile and crisp them up in a hot pan with some butter. Once they're brown to your liking, take them out of the pan, add a little sour cream and some chopped green onion, and your pierogies are ready to enjoy. Okay, let's give it a try. Delicious. Fresh cheese is really nice. Let's try one of the cabbage ones. Also really good. The bacon adds a lot of savoriness to it. So there you go, that's how I make pierogies. It's a classic dish for a reason. They're hearty, they're delicious, they're fun to make, and they're fun to eat. Plus, after all that work, I've got enough left over to last me until Parliament returns. And on that note, if you're one of the people who watches this channel for politics stuff, then we're probably going to have an election in, May.